Hello and welcome back to another edition of Press Pass on GNAT-TV. I'm Andrew McKeever, the news director at GNAT-TV's News Project, and it's a pleasure to have you all with us today on Friday, May 31st. Also a great pleasure to be joined by Cherise Forbes, who's no stranger to GNAT. Cherise had a few shows of her own here for a while, way back when. Actually, not that long ago, so what am I thinking here? But now, of course, as I'm sure you all know, Cherise is the managing editor of the Manchester Journal, and she's here to kind of give us a little bit of background, I guess, on how the paper is put together and kind of what are some of the stories that are top of the fold these days, to coin an old expression there. I'm showing my age here, I think. Anyway, Cherise, great to have you with us. Thank you very much for making the time for this.
Thank you for having me, Andrew. It's great to have the opportunity to connect with you and GNAT and the community overall.
Well, we're very glad that you're at the helm at the Journal and doing such a great job, and, keep it up.
Thank you.
So I just thought, we could start a little bit by talking about, the Journal is now published 5 times a week, 5 digital editions plus the, tried and true print edition on Friday. What's that like? I mean, take us behind the scenes here. Doing 5 papers a week strikes me as like, wow, that's a lot of work.
Yeah, it's a whole new world for the newspaper, but it's kind of a whole new world for news here in the North Shire, too. There's so much happening, and in recent years, I've just personally seen that expand and grow so much. So I'm glad that the paper has adjusted in that way. That actually happened before I came back. It's been, I think, for about a year now, we've had those e-editions into the fold as well. So Monday through Thursday, we've still got a really solid newspaper coming to you online. It's really sort of the same process as our regular newspaper. It's just, more environmentally friendly, a little more economically friendly in this hard day for news and local news especially. It's a really good opportunity to get some news out there, some more headlines to our readers, and to keep up a little bit more with what's happening in the North Shire.
So when would your deadlines then be for getting that paper, the digital version done? That must be sometime in the afternoon, I would imagine.
Yeah, it makes for an interesting day. So we get our paper to lay out around 3 p.m. each day, either for the print edition or for the e-editions. So that means the middle part of the day, if you don't hear from me, I'm definitely not ignoring you, but I'm in the zone writing and editing and getting the paper to our hub to get printed and laid out by 3 p.m. each day. So usually we're doing a lot of writing in the morning and attending meetings at night and making phone calls in between to get the news out there.
And you have a couple of freelancers to help you generate copy?
Yeah, so some bylines you guys might recognize, you and your viewers, is Gordon Dossett. He's a true professional. He's done a lot of work for us over the years, and he's been following great stories like the Pollitt Library had a recent situation that he has been investigating and covering in depth. We've got Ann Archer, who is a great business reporter and freelancer, and she also captures community stories with such heart that we're so lucky to have her. I'm terrified that I'm forgetting someone, but we do have a great roster of freelancers, and that's growing this summer with a few more folks coming in and some great interns from our local schools too, both now and into next fall.
And I wondered, how do you coordinate with the Banner? I mean, your sister publication. Yeah. You guys obviously share stories and share content and share leads. I mean, how does that all work, or how do you decide what story is going to be in the Journal first and the Banner next, or vice versa?
Yeah, it's a sort of a influx every day. We figure it out as we go to a degree. I'm on a call every morning with the Reformer and the Banner, so Brattleboro and Bennington, which is a great way for the 3 editors and our staffs to stay coordinated and aligned, like you said, making sure we're not scooping each other along the way since we are a team. But it's a good system because we have a little more flexibility that way. We have Mark Rondo, who does some great reporting from Arlington and Sunderland, Danielle Crozier, who does photography for both papers and community news, does a lot of great work both here in the North Shire and in Bennington. And when a story sort of crosses that line, we'll either share it sometimes if it's breaking news that's in Arlington, say, both the Banner and the Journal might run it the same day. And if it's a little more of a Bennington story, it might be something they run first. And of course, here in the North Shire, we want to make sure that the Journal is the top authority and voice for the news here and our community here. So
what are some of the main stories or storylines that you're covering today or anticipating to cover in the next few months? I maybe we could start off with the headline today. This one about the three organizations getting this grant. What three organizations are we talking about here?
Yeah, so this is a really exciting story, and it came in, right when we were getting the Thursday paper out, so I'm looking forward to doing a deeper dive on all three of these organizations and their projects. The first is the Manchester Riverwalk. They were awarded $400,000 to bring to fruition a bridge that I think a lot of us have seen mock-ups of over the years. This group has been fundraising for a long time and brainstorming and strategizing to get this money into their pockets, and I think there's a lot of fundraising that goes alongside that as well. So this seems like a true community effort to really expand this walking path that goes from the town green down towards Price Chopper. It connects a lot of different areas in town, and it's going to be a great recreational asset for downtown Manchester, I think. But they weren't the only ones. Merck Forest and Farmland Center got just about as much funding from VORAC to do some important work to connect their trail systems to the one at Meadowy Community School. And so that'll be another opportunity to enhance our trail infrastructure here in the North Shire, which people love as locals, people love it as visitors. It's great for all of us from a health perspective, an environment perspective. And along those same lines, the Smoky House Center in Danby is going to get some much needed funding, I think around $100,000, to do some community planning work and strategizing to really foment their next steps as one of the vital organizations serving our community and schools and environment. And I think a lot of thought work tied in with what Smoky House is doing as well. So stay tuned for more news on all three.
Wow, interesting. So as I've been trying to follow things, it seems like the Manchester Select Board and the Manchester Planning Commission have been having some interesting dialogues back and forth about housing issues, or one, and you had one story earlier this week about a new restaurant, and I think it's a 4-unit apartment that would be constructed at the site of the former Sam's Pizzeria across from the Stewart's there on 7A at the little mini roundabout there in front of Shaw's. Is that going to be one of these projects that gets kind of becomes, shall we say, controversial in some way or another, or what is the backstory here?
Yeah, I don't think that there's a ton of controversy there. There has been a lot of excitement on social media. I think that's one of the posts where we've gotten many more comments than I expected to get. And most of them are really supportive in pointing out how, the folks who run Christo's and the family that is really bringing this project to fruition have been in our community for a long time and are providing a lot of not a lot of, but 2 units of much needed housing, a restaurant, and I've heard some concern about the parking. That's the discussion that unfolded at the Planning Commission, at the Select Board the other night. And I think that's something that is probably going to be figured out between the municipality and the restaurant itself. I think Manchester has a pretty good system of figuring out if parking can't be allocated in one place, how do we do it in another? And that's not flawless, as any municipal project is, but I think the structure behind Walgreens was a good first step in that direction, and the funding that they get when projects like this, if they don't have enough parking, there's a mechanism through the town where they can pay for those parking spaces, quote unquote, that funding will be used to build new parking spaces at another place in town. So that seems like a viable option for this structure here, and I'm excited to see where the conversation goes going forward.
So it's like $2,000 a piece per parking space?
Yeah, that was part of the contention, actually. Thank you for asking about that. The rate was at $2,000 in 2015 when the Factory Point building was renovated by Bill Drunzik, and that at the time was based on the cost of constructing another parking space, pouring the cement, the labor, all of those different factors. And that price was used again in 2019 when the former Seasons became Haig's Sports Bar. When the developers for the new restaurant and housing project here in close to the village near Shaw's came to the select board, they were looking at that same rate, $2,000. But of course, a lot has changed in the last 5 years, as some select board members pointed out, and inflation has become a whole new beast to address. But as the project managers and developers pointed out, that price hasn't been changed before, and it can't be just changed without any warning. So what the select board ultimately decided was to charge that $2,000 rate from a few years ago, and look back at the land use and development ordinance and see, how can we articulate more clearly how the rate will be updated going forward. maybe by providing a formula to do that, or just identifying more clearly to the public so that they can account for this in their project planning when they do want to bring new development to Manchester, because it's sorely needed in some places, especially in the area of housing. So I think the town is focused on trying to make that easier, and it's not always flawless, as I said, but those long conversations are where it happens and how it happens, and those conversations are definitely happening in Manchester right now.
Trying to think, where else in town are there parking spaces or spaces for constructing new parking? I mean,
Yeah.
not a whole lot of open space at this point that's not unclaimed by something, but.
That is a quagmire, and Select Board Chair Ivan Beatty pointed that out. He said, if we keep giving away payment in lieu of parking, we will have a situation where the town's going to be on the hook to build one of those multi-story parking structures in the middle of town, which I know people don't want to see in aesthetically beautiful Manchester. So that is a bit of a quagmire, and there is a deeper conversation to unfold there. I don't think that this project will be the tipping point of that conversation. It's been around for a long time, and I think it'll continue, but an exciting one.
Interesting to follow that one. Another one I was kind of fascinated to read was the story you had about the open flags. I remember back in my day at the Journal that was a controversy. So we're going back 9 or 10 years on this one, and it was just fascinating to see that reemerge. I mean, so what do we have here? Is it kind of a replay of 9 or 10 years ago when a couple of the business owners who have retail operations, you want to make sure that folks who are going by know they are open and that the existing signage structure, their infrastructure they have, just isn't adequate enough? Is that their feeling?
Yeah, it is kind of like the open flags strike back a little bit. I was going back to your reporting a lot when reporting on this. And it's interesting how some of the key players are coming back, and really the same conversation is unfolding, but to a very different degree, where it seems like there is a lot of movement happening to make this change. And it's not a small feat to change the land use and development ordinance. The Select Board is doing that right now, the Planning Commission and Select Board, I should say, and it's been a very long process. It's taken some back and forth. You have to warn public meetings, both from the Planning Commission and the Select Board, I believe, which takes 30 days each time. So this is by no means a change that'll happen immediately. But just last night I was on a call, a public meeting from the Planning Commission, where they did decide to warn a public meeting for, I think, July 1st to talk about a revision that's been proposed by business owners. Catherine McLaughlin from the LePage Lingerie has been leading this effort a lot. There's a group of female business owners and, of course, the Manchester Business Association that have really wanted to see this happen. So I think that, with that community sort of grassroots effort to show up and say, we want this change, and we're going to help you make it happen, and in turn, some reciprocity from the Planning Commission to say, okay, how can we help you make this happen in a way that satisfies both the town's needs to remain aesthetic and uncluttered and free of that, competition between businesses of who has more open flags. When striking that balance is part of the work that's happening right now. So I think that they've got a pretty amenable to both sides proposal on the table, and it'll be a matter of seeing if it passes through the Planning Commission in July, it sounds like, and then the Select Board going forward.
So sometime before the end of the summer, you think you could have open flags?
That's the sense I got, and I got the sense that enforcement might not be as big of an issue while this, I don't want to say legislation, but this change to the ordinance is being considered.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of open flags around town right now.
I guess one of the rules of thumb always was, well, if you're going to allow a couple of people to have a flag, then everyone needs to be allowed, and then what would it look like if everyone did it?
Yeah.
I guess my feeling is that it wouldn't seem like it would be that terrible if everyone flew an open flag. I mean, as long as it's roughly the same kind of flag. I mean, I guess that's another issue. Could they be different colors or different formats or whatever?
Yeah, and I know plenty of people have kind of decried the ordinance in Manchester for being too strict, but there are areas where you drive into town and it is sort of cluttered and discombobulated a little bit, and Manchester does have a very hard-fought and hard-won aesthetic. So I think some of the changes that they've made to this original idea of let us just hang the open flags as we want is the business owners this time came to the Planning Commission and said, we have one single design that we want to see. We want to keep it clean, we want to keep it unified, we want to keep it limited to one flag per business essentially, but we want to make sure that we can tell our customers that we're here and ready to serve them, which is fair. And I think that the town has recognized that fairness, and they have changed the design. I think the flag that a lot of people see right now is a green bar on top, a white bar that says open in black text, and another green bar on the bottom. And they've replaced that with a smaller design that's just green and with the white open text on it. So there's some changes happening, none that I would call monumental, but it does seem like there is a big attempt to keep it unified and sort of clean and structured in a way.
So another story I wanted to ask you about, which caught my eye, was the one about Willow Pond.
Yeah.
That's been another long-running saga, I think. There's been, I know there was at least one serious attempt to convert the former hotel into housing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if it was affordable or workforce or market or whatever, but and it seemed like such an obvious place to have, and an easy place to convert those buildings into some very badly needed housing here in the area. And if I remember correctly, there was like a bit of a small technicality in the water or sewerage that kind of stymied things the last time around. So what are we seeing? Another try here? And has that little sewerage issue been fixed, or what do we know here?
Yeah, it's one that I don't want to say too much on. I'm still investigating a follow-up on our initial piece. And the reason that we had an initial piece go out in the first place was it was one of those cases where I was seeing a lot of misinformation circulating, especially on social media. And that is a circumstance where we'll step in as the journal and say, okay, let us clarify what the facts are for our community. I think that's an important role for our newspaper to be serving. So in this case, we don't know all the facts yet, and that was part of the article that we put out, that this development is still in a very nascent stage. It does seem like there's movement happening. It does seem that there must have been some sort of resolution to the issues that the developers had faced in the past, but I'm not sure of that, and that's something that we're still looking into. There is no clarity at this time as to whether it'll be affordable housing or market rate housing. Still a lot to be seen, and one that we're tracking down actively, but there is a lot of interest. Once that sign went up, there was a big conversation happening in town, and it's easy to see why. Housing is in a shortage, and people care deeply, and I think no one in this community does not know someone else that has not been impacted by the housing crisis. It touches all of us.
I mean, it's just going to be an ongoing problem, I think, for quite a while. I mean, it's a statewide, it's a nationwide issue, really. Between all the factors in play, between interest rates and the cost of building new housing, on one level a very fascinating question, but I suppose if you're someone who's looking for an apartment or a house to buy, extremely frustrating, and it'll be certainly an interesting one to follow right on through, as it has been for quite a while already.
The saga continues.
So you mentioned something there in the course of your answer there about the Willow Pond that I also wanted to touch upon. It seems like social media, on the one hand, is sort of a competitor, I guess, in a way you could say. That a lot of people seem to get their news from Facebook or TikTok or Instagram or somewhere online. And yet at the same time, it's also probably an interesting source of news stories or ideas for stories you might write.
Yeah, it is. It sometimes scoops the breaking news out from under us. I'll sometimes see something on the community forum before I've had a chance to get a fully vetted and investigated article out on it. But it is a great thermometer for how the community feels and what they're passionate about, and it's a great way to find information as well. It is something that we track a lot, especially the community forums, and try to keep an eye on the news that's happening lately, but especially the conversations that are happening. What are people getting fired up about? What do they care about? What are they misunderstanding, or what do they want to know more about and learn more about? And it's a really great way. I'm sad we missed out on Cannoli Gate, but there's a bunch of other news that has surfaced on the forum, including Willow Pond, that has given us a great opportunity to engage with the community and serve their needs more fully than we've been able to in the past. So it is a competitor for sure, but it's a great metric for us to utilize too, to make the news even better for the people that are in our area and our readers that have been with us the whole way.
But it's interesting, though, that there's a contrast between what you're putting out in the paper or online and what gets said in the course of a
Yes.
series of comments on Facebook. I mean, I guess I suppose most of that is probably sort of kind of accurate, but I guess there's always going to be a question as to how accurate is it.
Yeah, it's really interesting, especially, with the development near Shaw's that you were talking about before, the restaurant and the housing that's planned and sparked this parking debate. That was one case where when we posted it on social media, there was a bevy of comments that came in, and some were asking questions that were really clearly answered in the article. So those conversations usually leave a lot on the table. And sometimes there are things that are said that are close enough to the truth, but that little bit of space between the truth and what's said on social media can sometimes be very substantial and very impactful. With the newspaper, you can rest assured that there are local people, faces that you can recognize that are looking into the news, calling people, asking, is this true? Is this how you understand it? Looking at the documents and checking what those people have told us against what's on paper, and really making sure that we're giving you the right facts. And when there is, an issue that if facts are not included or not included to their fullest ability, then the paper is also responsible to then either issue a correction or update our readers on the actual circumstances. So we do have a higher level of responsibility than your average person sharing the news on Facebook. And I think that that's a really valuable role to be playing. It's a role that we take really seriously. So if there is that misinformation around, you can bet that we're going to be jumping on it to try to add some clarity to the conversation.
But I think that highlights a real difference between what you're doing and the online community does, is that you will correct mistakes. Right. Or when new information comes in, or update stories or whatever. It's a little more random, I think, at least that's my sense of it, when it comes to online stuff. And I guess, that sort of, leads into a kind of a much larger subject around, where people get their information now, and how reliable that is, and trusted sources. I mean, my own feeling has been, and it's certainly been one that's been reinforced a lot over the last few years, is that the pressure that small local papers are under, where I think I read a statistic earlier this week that really shocked me, with like about 2 to 3 papers a week go out of business somewhere around the country, which is like stunning, really, when you think about it. Between the number of jobs that are then going away, and perhaps even more importantly, the information that a community gets that is reliable and or correctable if necessary. Where does that lead us down the road? If a trusted source of information like a local paper that does so much to kind of bind a community together isn't able to kind of, perform that function.
Yeah, I think that, we've seen a taste of it over the years as newspapers have become weakened by the industry itself going into flux, and the economy changing and evolving over the years too. And I think here in the North Shire, we've seen a lot of different eras for our local newspaper. That I look back to your time at the Journal and when I was a young person reading the Banner, and look at that as sort of a golden era. There was a bigger investment in local news back then than there was for that dark period of time when there was big corporate ownership of these local papers. And that changed a few years ago, 2016, 2017, when our 3 local papers, the Banner, the Reformer, and the Journal, did have local ownership come in the form of the Berkshire Eagle having a conglomerate of papers. And I think that was a great first step. And in recent years, we've had new ownership come in for just the Vermont papers, and I think that was another great evolution into the way that we're resourced and the way that we're reporting our news. Even in the first few months back here, I've heard a lot of positive feedback from our community about how excited they are and eager they are to see North Shire-focused news in the Manchester Journal. And that is what I think we lose out on when we go towards either corporate ownership or news on social media. You see the big headlines about Donald Trump, about the world, what's unfolding on this large scale, but you miss out on the community news that really informs what's happening here. What is your local government doing? What are the people in your community doing that's making it shine and making it the place it is. I think those things are really important. Celebrating together and being informed and proactive together, and the news directly facilitates both of those things.
Yeah, well, it is critically important, I think, and I confess I didn't really fully appreciate myself how important that was. You kind of just take it for granted, but then when it's no longer there, when you're not hearing anymore on a regular basis what your local select board is doing, or town government or businesses are doing, or what's happening, there's a real empty space that's created that it's hard to see how that really gets filled in a good way.
It's exciting to see it, filled by our local media landscape here, though, because take your average select board meeting, you can read the highlights in the journal and get a sense of the high-level conversation that happened. And if you're really interested, you can go back and watch the full meeting on GNAT, which I think is a great resource for people to have. And I think it's one that people utilize really often as well, which is good to see, because not every local journalist or local public access station is so lucky to have people engaged and interested in what we're putting out there.
Well, and let's hope that continues. So we have like a couple of minutes left, and I just wanted to ask you one more question about an upcoming news story, which I'm sure is going to be at top of the folder. The cell tower proposal is back.
Yes.
June 11th, I guess we're having another joint hearing between the Planning Commission, the Select Board, and I guess a balloon test next week. So tell us about that. I mean, is Verizon have they come back with a revised proposal? Is that what's going on?
They have, yeah. So they first came forward with a proposal, I think in January, and it was for the location near Hunter Park, Riley Rink, that had people pretty fired up. I know people were concerned about the health impacts of that location, considering it's a big community hub. There's a lot of activity there. And there were also concerns about the visibility of the tower, how it would look in a pretty central location in town. When Verizon came to the Public Utility Commission, they gave them a pretty high bar to clear. They said, you have to tell us why we should override the input of the town. Both the Select Board and Planning Commission had said, this is not the location that's preferable to us. And they also had to explain why they could override or should override parts of the town plan, or the land use ordinance, I should say, that dictate how high a structure can be. I think this was 10 feet over that limit. Instead of doing that, they did revise the plan and come back with the same location, but they made some changes to the structure. It's a little bit shorter now, it's a little more covered, and the town still has an opportunity to give our feedback on that again. So the balloon test will be a first step, I think, next Tuesday, the 4th.
That's what I have to remember, and just moments before we went on the air.
Yeah, and then I know June 11th is when that cell tower conversation is happening. And, the first one was a pretty long conversation and a pretty passionate one. So I'm interested to see where it goes this time. It seems pretty clear that capacity is needed here. It's just a matter of finding a spot that's amenable. And it sounds like the Select Board and Planning Commission are trying to sort of do some of that work ahead of time, so that either with this proposal or another one that comes down the pipeline, we can be proactive and say, this location you suggested isn't ideal, but here's another one that would work for our town, so that we can get the cell service we need in a place that actually works for our community.
Yeah, well, that always seems to be the problem. Is there's never the right perfect place for
I
it.
know.
It's like always going to be in somebody's backyard or view shed or whatever, and they're going to go, wait a minute, why can't it be over there? We're
It
going
has
to
to
look
please
at
the
it.
developer too, and make sure it suits their needs. So it's
Yeah.
another quagmire. It seems like one that's come up a few times, but it's a conversation that'll keep happening, I think.
I'm sure it will. Well, all right, we're going to have to leave it there for today, Cherise, but thanks again for making the time to come by and give us the background on what's going on at the Journal. It's great to have you back here.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. And pick up your journal each Friday.
That's right. All right, well, we'll leave it there for today. Thank you all for being with us. Have a great weekend. We'll see you again the next time. Take care.